Welcome to Mox Box Wrestling. My name is The Colonist, and this is going to be a little something new that we're doing on CIW's channel. What we're going to do is it's basically going to be kind of like a shoot interview where I'm just going to give my opinion on certain things around the wrestling world that I've caught on to. Now, we're still going to do CIW programming. That's still going to come up, but we're also going to have this kind of on the side just to kind of keep the channel moving, so it's not just like, oh, if I don't post an episode, nothing's there. So what we're going to talk about today is WrestleKingdom 11. Now, admittedly, I didn't watch the whole show, mainly because I just haven't had the opportunity yet, but I've heard a lot of things about it. I saw two matches on the card. I saw Naito and Tanahashi, and I saw the Omega Okada match. Now, I'm not going to talk about Naito Tanahashi, although that was a great match. I'm going to stick to Omega Okada just because of all the press that's really surrounded that match, with Dave Meltzer giving it a 6-star rating and tons of people reacting. A lot of WWE guys have given the nod to Omega Okada. But I've also heard mixed things about it. You know, I've heard it's overrated because it's not pro wrestling, it's a bunch of flippy shit and sports entertainment and blah, blah, blah. Looking your way, Jim Cornette. So here's my take on it. I watched the match in its entirety, 46 minutes plus, the 14 or 15 from the beforehand, the entrances and the afterwards. Before I get into the actual match itself, I want to give all the props, a lot of credit to Kevin Kelly and Steve Corino, who really, I think, were the great commentator pair to really show that it really felt like two fans watching the show and talking about each guy and individual, the road that led them here. It really engaged, especially in those early 15 minutes where things were really slow and they were pacing themselves out, starting to really get the chemistry feel, really working through those little spots like the exchange of headlocks and some knees. We really got the scene set for us, especially those of us who don't follow New Japan. We really had the scene set for us by Kevin Kelly and Steve Corino, and I thought that was helpful into the ambiance of the entire match. Now, I have yet to hear the Jim Ross version of the commentary, and I'm sure that Jim is going to kill it. I know he will. He's one of the greatest announcers of all time, even at the age he's at. But notwithstanding, to listen to Steve and Kevin, it made the match feel more important. And I think that as a commentator, that's really all you can be required to do, is make a match feel like it's more important. So props to them. As far as the athleticism in that match, I think that goes without saying. I mean, we saw that there were a lot of impressive high spots, notably the moonsault off the top over the barricade into Okada, which was great. I thought the selling was some of the best selling I've seen in a wrestling match in recent years, in recent memory that I can recall. Mainly because I'm of the opinion that WWE's matches are far too fast-paced. They're all spot after spot after spot after spot. And this didn't feel that way. It felt a lot more methodical. It felt a lot more drawn out, where these two really had an issue with each other and they were going to take as long as they could to make the other person suffer. And I think that was really, really emphasized by how few high spots there were. Particularly through the first, half an hour of that match. They had a couple. We had the table spot. That table looked like it was made out of cornflakes boxes, but that's a different issue altogether. But, the backdrop through the table, where everyone was around, I thought it was an interesting choice to have the Young Bucks, to have the factions out there and then not involve them in any way, which I think was a good thing. I don't think Okada Omega would have benefited from any outside interference, but it also didn't really make sense that they were there because they were just there. They just were more bodies. It was more space being taken up. And not to say, they didn't interfere, so it wasn't like a huge issue, but it didn't make sense to me why they were even out there in the first place if they weren't going to be used as instruments of telling the story of the match. So then, we have the over-the-top onto the table. We have the moonsault. And then one of the things that really impressed me was towards the end of the match. Normally with a New Japan match, when I watch them, it's finisher after finisher after finisher after finisher, and there's like 5 or 6, maybe 3 or 4 from both sides before somebody finally gets a victory. We only saw, 2 or 3 Rainmakers, and we never saw the One-Winged Angel. We saw him set up for it over and over again. But we never saw the One-Winged Angel. And I thought that was so well done. That Omega, who had this phenomenal year, won the G1, moved himself up to heavyweights, proved that he was this big marquee guy, but just couldn't quite get it. Couldn't quite get it against the guy who has become almost synonymous with New Japan Pro Wrestling and Okada. And I think that really helped tell the story, that finish never happened. And of course we saw the tombstones. One of the biggest complaints I heard from that, just scouring the internet, was that, there was a tombstone pile driver and then the guy immediately got up after that. But it was a little different though, because in WWE, as opposed just to in a comparison of styles, in WWE, if somebody got hit with a first of all, nobody'd be getting hit with a tombstone pile driver because everything's dangerous. But if you hit with a tombstone pile driver by somebody other than The Undertaker, it wouldn't be the guy who executed the tombstone picking the guy up, which is what we saw in the Okada Omega match. You'd see the guy who just got tombstone just get up. And that's the type of no-selling that always irritates me, as opposed to picking somebody up after a big thunderous move like that to put the nail in the coffin. And keep in mind, that was all part of the story. The whole part of the story was, I'm going to teach you that you are not ready to be at this level, and I will give you everything I have, as just like you will give me everything you have. So I didn't really think that took away from the match. Particularly for how few high spots we saw leading up to the climax of the match. It didn't feel like it was overdoing it. It protected the finisher. Really, it protected the finisher. Both the Rainmaker and the One-Winged Angel. And all in all, I thought it was a great match. The selling was great. You didn't see that goofiness out of Kenny Omega that I've seen in matches of his before. It was definitely a darker, more serious tone. Like, this is the big one. And it really felt like the big one. It felt like this was the climax of the show. And I really got to give credit to both athletes for not doing ridiculous moves also. We saw good moves. We saw hard strikes and that strong style that we've come to become synonymous with New Japan Pro Wrestling. But it didn't feel like they were trying to make this big athletic spectacle of leap over here and jump over there and do crazy stuff, which they did, but they timed it out well enough where it felt like there was significant build to each move. And I got to give both participants credit for that. At the end of that match, I said, whether you like pro wrestling or sports entertainment, whatever the hell you want to call it, this is what pro wrestling is about. There were people in tears at the end of that match. If you look into the audience, there were people crying because that's how good that match was. Now, would I say that it's the greatest wrestling match to ever take place? No. Do I think it deserves 6 stars? No. But do I think that it was a phenomenal matchup between two people who, Okada gets the nod a lot, but Omega's really had to fight for that. And I think that he really proved his worth. No matter whether you were a fan of him or not, if that was the only match you ever saw of Kenny Omega, you'd feel satisfied with it. And I think that that's really all you can ask for. It got Omega over, even though he lost the match. I think Omega's more over now than he's been in years, particularly for the North American publicity he just got out of that. And Okada, that really cements him as one of the greatest New Japan has ever seen. So he's just as over. He's still the champion. So nobody really lost in this battle, especially with New Japan and their plans to move the G1 to the United States and really start going global. I think that there are a lot of good things for New Japan, and this match, they're going to look back and say this was the defining moment for New Japan Pro Wrestling. This is when New Japan became a contender. Are they in the same league as the WWE? No. But they're getting there. And they're starting to slowly move forward, and that's what I look forward to seeing in New Japan. And I think the New Japan made kind of a fan out of the Colonists. So we'll have to see what happens next with New Japan and Kenny Omega, where he's going to go. Might see him show up at the Rumble, might not. Who knows? But at least for my part, I enjoyed the match. I wouldn't rate it. I don't like rating matches because it levels this basis of comparison. It was a phenomenal match. They tore the house down. A great event all around from what I hear from what the rest of the show was like. That's going to do it for this edition of the Mox Box Wrestling. My name is The Colonist, and I'll catch you later.